All right, so those are the parts that make the cowling. And what you want to do is start rolling them. That's the one that goes against the little bulkhead first. Roll it to an approximate shape. Doesn't have to be exact, as you're going to butt join all these. Just make sure it kind of is close. That's close enough for starters. And then you, I guess simply or not simply, you take the next piece. This is just in line from on the little sheet of paper when I cut them out. So this is the next one, the next smaller one. And what you do is you start, at least how I do it, start on an edge and very carefully, not with a whole lot of glue, start adding the next piece, and you just butt join it. There's no tabs. In some cowlings, there's tabs. Depends on the designer. In this case, just butt joins. And they're surprisingly strong, and they work actually quite well. I'm somebody who'd be really nervous about doing that, but I guess you shouldn't be. And you just very slowly work this around and do a little bit at a time. The beauty of this glue, of course, is that it is tacky pretty fast. And so it gives you time to work, but it also lets you, also glues fast enough that it doesn't fall apart. And so the key, I guess, is to take it very slow, small bits at a time, and a little bit of glue, put a lot of glue on there, a little bit of glue at a time, and just work your way around. And these things come out surprisingly well. Now, if you're really talented at this, like I'm always talking about the Polish modelers, they can make things that when they're done, they basically look like there's hardly any line there at all. In my case, that's not going to be the case. Slowly work your way all the way around. I mean, this is split up and edited, but to make the whole cowling took me about 15 minutes from start to finish of adding the paper. So I'm just trying to show you one piece going on here, how it fits. And, you have to go back sometimes and do a little spot gluing here and there. But you end up with a piece, and that's the first step. And you kind of form it and push it and mold it and tug at it just to get it to be approximately the right shape again. I test it, and I can see if I kind of give it some pressure on the ends, it'll fit. So now you're going to be spared. I just did this and sped this up because I wanted to show how you do it, but not put you through the sheer hell that is watching someone glue edges together. But again, it doesn't take as long as you think, and it's stronger and cleaner than you think. I personally hate butt joints. I think they're really hard to do. But, that was a joke. But they are surprisingly good. And you can see as you go down in size, the cowling starts to make the shape, form the shape it's sort of supposed to. And you sort of squeeze it and push it and tug it. And see, my thumb is pushing into the previous piece of paper. And I'm just trying to make sure that I have something that has the right general shape. And you can see that it does, which is nice. Now this last piece I'm doing in regular speed because this is the little front location piece. And on the triplane cowling, this actually is, it looks like in the real one, a flat piece, which this is, but there actually is like a seam that goes around. And I'm not sure if I can reproduce that or not. We'll see what happens. So it really shouldn't be smooth. But as you play with that a little bit, it fit right in place. And proof that it's stronger than you think. And you just keep working your way around the edge. And you touch it to the edge carefully. Get your excess glue off, and there you go. When it's dry, which is quick, you check and make sure it'll kind of fit, which this does. It actually looks a little small. What I ended up doing later is actually, when I got it all finished, I've put it on the front, on the bulkhead, and it sort of let it sit overnight, and it sort of stretched it out into a good shape. And now it fits perfectly. Well, it fits really well when it comes time. But you play with it and squish it with your fingers until you're satisfied. And so there's the basic shape, and there's what the inside looks like. which is kind of neat to see because it's definitely you can see that it's these little sheets of paper. Now I use my little zip kicker stuff, and I use super glue. I've used epoxy before as well, but super glue seems to work fine. It's quicker and it's good enough for the paper. I hold it with this little piece of bamboo, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to liberally apply thick super glue on the inside. You probably could use thin stuff too, but for me, I think that putting the thick stuff on all these seams, gives it a fair amount of surface and a fair amount of thickness. Because as you sand this thing on the outside, this is the first step trying to get rid of those seams, you're going to lose material. And you may, in fact, sand through the paper, which is fine if there's a backing behind it. And so I just very carefully put glue, or I guess not so carefully, put glue around there, and I smooth it out a little bit with an old brush, or I smooth it out with a finger or with a piece of bamboo, and I get all the seams, all the rounded edges, and then the part where the front cowling flat part fits. And then I add my zip kicker accelerator material, and it wings around there, and you can kind of see as it works. It's fantastic stuff. And now the cowling is dry. I look at it again and again, just as a first approximation. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And again, if I was actually really good at edge joints, it would look even better. So don't be afraid of end joints. Don't listen to me when I say I hate them. I'm just not very good at them. But then there's where the engine will go. And again, I see it's a little small, but I fixed that later. It turned out really quite well. So now, what do? You have this thing, it's strong, it's not going to fall apart. It's kind of delicate, you got to be careful. But you start sanding it. Before I did that, I'm sorry. The edge didn't quite line up, and so I drew a line on it with a pencil up against the bulkhead, and I just trimmed it off with a little pair of sharp scissors, just to bring the edge even, because it wasn't even before. I think you could also use a little bit of sandpaper, which works fine. Now, the fun part begins, which is you sand until you bleed. You just kind of go around the edges, put your thumb on the back, or your thumb on the front and a finger in the back to give you some kind of purchase. And you go around and you gently sand this. It's pretty high, pretty low grit, sandpaper. It takes up a lot of material. And you'll see it starts to take off the paper, and you can see the white underneath. Because the goal is to sand these ridges so that they disappear, or close to it. What we end up doing is like you do with plastic models, which is you sand and sand and sand and change grits, and then you throw primer on it, and then you sand again, you throw primer on it, you sand again. I ended up making about, I'd say maybe 5 coats of primer to get it to the point where I actually liked it and it's ready to be painted. In my case, going to be an olive green, like on the factory. But you can see, you just work your way around. And the reason I'm showing this in its entirety is just to show you how you work and how fast it goes. It's pretty quick. And you're just knocking those ridges down. And they're not going to be perfect the first time. That's the whole point. It's just little bits at a time. As I putting on coats of paint. You don't put on a huge thick coat first. You put on a bunch of light coats, and everything works much better for you if you do that. So you get that all nice with that gritty sandpaper, like 80 grit or something. And then you switch to lighter one. This is like 210 or 150 or some such thing. And you go back and you sand the whole thing all over again, just where you were. But this time you're using this other grit sandpaper. And you just let it go, and you go all the way around, and you just sand it until it's all nice and clean. And it'll be smooth to the touch. You'll be able to feel that it's much smoother, and you see a little more materials off too. And you check the profile, and you try to make sure it looks good, make sure it's even, make sure everything still has the shape it's supposed to have, and clean out the holes after a while. Make sure I'm looking on the edge, making sure that it looks good. But after this, and after you feel that it looks good and it feels pretty smooth, your next step is to take it out in the garage and give it a shot of some kind of primer. I use a Tamiya gray primer like I do on my plastic models. And that's what the next little series shows. This is after one coat, and you can see it's still wet. And it looks horrible, but that's okay. That's the first coat. You then let it dry. It dries quickly because it's lacquer, and you sand it back with lights. After this point, I'm using always the 210 or the 150. And if you do that about 5 times, you end up with that. Pretty nice.